The cold emptiness of space stretched far beyond the viewports of the small spacecraft. Inside, two figures were silently preparing for their journey to a new world. The pilot, a human engineer named Marcus, was a skilled technician, always calm under pressure. Beside him, his unexpected companion, an alien named Zethra, was calm but visibly uneasy. She wasn't human, her skin glowing with a soft bluish hue, and her large violet eyes seemed to flicker with an intensity that made Marcus feel uneasy at times. Yet there was a sense of trust between them. They had both been brought together by the same mission: exploration. The spaceship they were traveling in had been designed for long journeys, but it was not meant for emergencies. However, despite their advanced technology, an unexpected event changed everything. Suddenly, there was a sharp, terrifying jolt that sent both of them lurching forward in their seats. The control panels flickered wildly, and the sound of alarms filled the small cockpit. Marcus quickly grabbed the flight controls, trying to steady the ship, but it was already too late. They were caught in the powerful grip of a cosmic storm, an uncharted electrical disturbance that had appeared out of nowhere. Zethra's calmness cracked for the first time. She hissed, her alien voice rising in panic. "Marcus, we need to stabilize the ship." "I know." He snapped back, his hands flying over the controls, but the ship was already spiraling. The turbulence was unbearable. Pieces of debris from the craft floated around them as they fought to regain control. The stars outside the viewport became nothing but streaks of light as the ship plummeted through the storm. With a final bone-shaking crash, everything went dark. When Marcus regained consciousness, he felt the heavy pressure of his seat harness holding him in place. His head was spinning, and his vision was blurry. He tried to move, but his body felt strangely stiff, as if the crash had knocked the life out of him. A groan escaped his lips as he blinked rapidly, trying to clear his vision. It took him a moment to realize that the cockpit was eerily silent. The whir of the ship's engines, the buzz of life support systems, everything was gone. He slowly turned his head, eyes falling on Zethra, who was slumped in her seat beside him. "Zethra," his voice came out rough and hoarse. "Are you all right?" Her eyes fluttered open, her violet gaze locking with his. There was a moment of stillness between them, as if they were both trying to understand the situation. The alien slowly nodded, her alien skin shimmering slightly, but there was no mistaking the fear in her eyes. "We're alive," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But the ship, it's gone." Marcus finally managed to unbuckle his harness. His legs felt weak as he stumbled out of his seat, still trying to shake off the effects of the crash. He looked around the cockpit, broken pieces of equipment, smoke rising from the wreckage, and flickering lights. They were stranded. Marcus swore under his breath. The communication system was down. The engines were completely fried. Even the emergency beacon was damaged, its signal dead. The ship had no chance of reaching anyone. "Well, at least we didn't die," Marcus muttered, attempting to inject some humor into the situation, though he knew it wouldn't change the fact that they were stranded on a completely unknown world. He turned to Zethra. "Can you tell where we are?" Zethra stood up slowly, her alien body moving with fluid grace despite the crash. She stepped towards the viewport, peering out into the vast unknown. The landscape beyond was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The planet's surface was bathed in a pale light, as if the sun were weak and distant. Strange mountains, their peaks glowing faintly, rose in the distance. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional gust of wind that rattled the remnants of the ship. The ground below them was uneven, with patches of glowing plants and jagged rock formations. "It's an alien world," Zethra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never seen anything like this before." Marcus stared out the window, his heart pounding. He had been to many worlds before, but none like this. The scenery was beautiful, almost magical, yet terrifying in its unfamiliarity. He could sense the danger in the air, the feeling that something was watching them from beyond the horizon. "Well, it's not exactly a vacation spot," Marcus said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and fear. He knew they needed to get out of the ship and assess the situation. He turned to Zethra, trying to suppress the growing panic inside him. "We need to figure out how to survive. We've got no choice." Zethra nodded, her expression now more focused. "You're right. But first, we need to see if we can repair any of the systems. There might be a way to send a distress signal." Marcus looked at the damaged console. There was no way to fix it all at once, but if they could access the secondary power systems, they might have a chance. "I'll check the rear cargo hold," Marcus said. "There might be some tools back there." Zethra agreed, and the two of them made their way out of the cockpit, carefully stepping over the debris. The ship's interior was a mess. Everywhere they looked, things were broken, scattered, or destroyed. It was as if the very fabric of the ship had been torn apart by the force of the crash. When they reached the rear cargo hold, Marcus quickly began to sift through the supplies. There were some basic survival tools, food rations, and a few repair kits, but it was clear that they were going to need more. Their best bet was to find shelter and gather resources from the alien world. Zethra stepped over to the ship's emergency manual and began scanning through the pages. "We can't stay here long. The environment may be unstable, and we need to find shelter." Marcus agreed, pulling out a compact survival kit and checking its contents. It had basic tools, a first aid kit, and a portable energy source. He could hear the wind picking up outside, howling through the cracks in the ship's hull. Time was running out. They had to leave. The two survivors stood in silence for a moment, both of them fully aware of how grave the situation was. But there was no time for fear. They had to make a plan, and they had to move. "Let's gather what we can and head out," Marcus said, his voice firm. "We'll survive. We just have to stick together." Zethra gave him a determined look, her alien eyes reflecting the same resolve. "Together," she agreed. As they made their way out of the ship and into the alien landscape, the real adventure was just beginning. The crash had only been the beginning of their struggles, and the mysteries of this strange planet were waiting to be uncovered. Whatever lay ahead, they knew one thing. They had to survive, and they would need each other to do it. The alien planet's atmosphere was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The air was thick and cool, the kind of chill that seemed to seep into your bones. His breath formed small clouds as he exhaled, and despite the urgency of their situation, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he looked up at the strange, glowing sky. The stars seemed different here, scattered in patterns he didn't recognize, like distant fireflies in a dark expanse. There was something about it that made him feel small, insignificant, and yet strangely at peace. But the peace wouldn't last long. "We need to find shelter." Zethra's voice broke through his thoughts, snapping him back to reality. Marcus turned and nodded. His mind was racing, filled with thoughts of how to survive in a world they knew nothing about. The ship was beyond repair, and even though they had salvaged some tools and rations from the wreckage, it was clear they couldn't rely on the remains of the ship for long. The world outside was their only option. Zethra moved with a grace that surprised Marcus. Even though she was an alien, her every movement seemed fluid, her senses sharp. She looked around, her glowing skin giving her an otherworldly aura, as she scanned the landscape. "This way," she said, pointing to a dense cluster of alien plants ahead. "We'll find shelter there." Marcus followed her, the sound of his boots crunching on the strange, spongy ground beneath them. They walked in silence for a while, the weight of their predicament settling in. The planet was vast, the terrain so foreign it seemed as though they had landed on another world entirely. The mountains in the distance loomed like silent giants, their peaks wrapped in a strange, ethereal fog that shifted and swirled in the breeze. It was beautiful, yes, but also unsettling. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the silence between them grew. Marcus wanted to speak, to break the tension, but the words never came. Zethra's presence was calming, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. Zethra stopped abruptly, her sharp eyes scanning the area. "There's movement," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus froze. His heart skipped a beat. Was it a predator? He had no idea what kind of creatures lived on this planet, but the thought of one attacking them sent a cold shiver down his spine. Zethra raised her hand, signaling for him to stay still. Her eyes narrowed as she observed the movement. Then, with a swift motion, she crouched down low, blending into the shadows of the alien plants. Marcus followed her lead, crouching beside her, his breath shallow. He tried to steady his nerves, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead kept him on edge. His eyes flickered back and forth, scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. The movement grew closer, and soon they saw it. It wasn't a creature, but a strange group of alien beings, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. They were tall, with long limbs, and smooth, translucent skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their bodies seemed to ripple with energy, like they were made of light itself. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He had never imagined meeting another intelligent species on this planet, let alone one like this. He turned to Zethra, but she was already signaling him to remain still. The aliens didn't seem to notice them. They moved with purpose, seemingly unaware of the two stranded travelers. As they passed by, Marcus and Zethra held their breath, hoping they wouldn't be detected. Once the aliens had gone, Zethra stood up, her posture tense. "That was close," she whispered. "We need to be careful. They could be dangerous." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. The aliens were unlike anything he had ever encountered, but there was something about them that didn't seem hostile, just strange. He wasn't sure if they were hostile or not, but he didn't want to take any chances. Zethra turned and continued walking, and Marcus followed, his thoughts filled with questions. Who were these beings? What did they want? And more importantly, could they help them escape this planet? They reached the cluster of alien plants that Zethra had pointed out earlier. The plants were large and had thick, bulbous trunks that glowed faintly, casting a soft light in the dim surroundings. Their leaves were wide and sturdy, and Marcus could see the faint outline of a natural cave behind them. It seemed like the perfect place to take shelter for the night. "We'll stay here," Zethra said, her voice calm but firm. "This will protect us from the wind and the cold." Marcus didn't hesitate. He knew they needed to rest, and this was their only chance. He quickly began to gather some of the glowing plants, using them as a makeshift barrier to seal off the entrance of the cave. Zethra worked alongside him, her alien strength allowing her to carry heavier loads without breaking a sweat. As night fell, the temperature dropped. The air grew colder, and the wind picked up, howling through the rocky terrain outside. But inside their shelter, it was warmer. The soft glow of the plants around them provided just enough light to see, and Marcus felt a small sense of relief. For now, they were safe. "I think we can rest here for the night," Marcus said, sinking down against the wall of the cave. "We'll start looking for a way out tomorrow." Zethra nodded, but there was something in her eyes, an unease that Marcus couldn't shake. "We can rest, but we can't forget where we are," she said softly. "This planet holds secrets. It's not as empty as it seems." Marcus frowned, his thoughts returning to the strange beings they had seen earlier. What did Zethra mean? What could they be hiding? Before he could ask her anything more, Zethra's voice broke through his thoughts. "We need to eat. You're right to want to rest, but we can't do that on an empty stomach." Marcus agreed, and together they unpacked the rations they had salvaged from the wreckage. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. They ate in silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The reality of their situation was slowly sinking in. They had no idea where they were, and no way to contact anyone. They were truly stranded. As the hours passed, the wind outside began to pick up, rattling the rocks above them. The faint sound of distant thunder echoed across the land, and the strange glow of the sky seemed to pulse and shift in rhythm with the storm. Marcus lay down, staring at the ceiling of the cave. His mind kept racing with questions. How could they escape this planet? And what was Zethra's true story? He had known her for a short time, but he didn't fully trust her. There were still so many things about her that didn't add up. He closed his eyes, hoping for some rest. But sleep didn't come easily. Every sound outside, every shift of the wind, made him anxious. This planet felt alive, as if it was waiting for them to make a mistake. The night dragged on, and the storm outside seemed to grow more intense. Yet, despite the chaos outside, Marcus felt a small sense of comfort in Zethra's presence. They were alone together in this strange world, but they were in it together. For the first time since the crash, he realized that he wasn't as alone as he thought. As the night passed, Marcus made a silent promise to himself. He would do whatever it took to survive, and to help Zethra survive too. The morning sun, if you could call it that, rose slowly over the alien horizon. Its faint glow bathed the planet's surface in a soft, eerie light. Marcus woke with the cool breeze still sweeping through the rocky terrain, the air thick with the scent of unfamiliar flora. The night had passed quietly, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. He could still hear the distant rumblings of thunder from the storm that had passed, a constant reminder of the planet's untamed nature. Zethra was already awake, as usual. She stood at the entrance of their shelter, her alien eyes scanning the landscape with the sharpness of a predator. The strange landscape before them seemed to pulse with life, but the deeper one looked, the more unsettling it became. "We need to keep moving," Zethra said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "The longer we stay here, the more we'll attract attention. This world is alive, and not all of it is friendly." Marcus didn't argue. They had already encountered strange beings, and the last thing they needed was to remain in one place for too long, tempting fate. The planet might look peaceful, but it had an underlying danger that neither of them could ignore. As they packed up their shelter, Marcus's mind was buzzing with questions. What was this planet? Why had the strange beings they'd encountered earlier seemed so different from the rest of the world? Were they the remnants of an ancient civilization, or was something darker at work here? Zethra seemed to sense his thoughts. "I think there's more to this planet than we realize. The ship's crash wasn't an accident, Marcus. It brought us here for a reason." "Yeah," Marcus said with a sigh. "We've barely scratched the surface, and already it feels like we're being pulled into something much bigger than we thought." Zethra nodded, her gaze distant. "There's a place I've heard of, a place where the ancient ones lived. If we can find it, we might uncover answers. It's deep in the mountains, beyond the forest, near the river. I've heard stories of its power, and I believe it's the key to understanding this world." Marcus felt a mixture of apprehension and excitement. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but the thought of finding answers made his heart race. "Let's go then. We have no other choice." The trek was harder than Marcus had anticipated. The terrain was rugged, with jagged rocks and sharp cliffs that seemed to rise out of nowhere. The further they walked, the more alien the world became. The plants were unlike anything Marcus had seen. Some had sharp, spiny leaves, while others had soft, luminescent petals that glowed with an eerie light. The ground beneath their feet was unstable, and strange sounds echoed from the distant forest, making every step feel like a risk. Despite the difficulty, Zethra seemed unfazed. Her alien nature gave her an edge in navigating the wild terrain, and she moved swiftly through the dense forest, her movements fluid and confident. Marcus struggled to keep up, his human body feeling clumsy against the alien landscape. As they climbed higher, the air grew thinner, and the temperature dropped. But the most unsettling thing was the feeling that they were being followed. Every time Marcus turned around, the forest behind them seemed to be shifting, as if something, or someone, was watching from the shadows. He could hear the rustling of leaves and the faint crunch of twigs underfoot, but whenever he looked, there was nothing there. It was as though the planet itself was alive, observing their every move. By mid-afternoon, they reached a clearing, and Marcus felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. At the center of the clearing was an ancient structure, a massive stone archway, covered in glowing symbols and intricate carvings. The arch seemed to hum with an energy that made the hairs on the back of Marcus's neck stand up. "This is it," Zethra said softly, her eyes wide with awe. "This is the place I've been searching for." Marcus stepped closer to the archway, his heart pounding. The carvings on the stones seemed to shimmer as he approached, the symbols glowing faintly in the dim light. There was a sense of ancient power here, something beyond human comprehension. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. Zethra reached out and placed her hand on the arch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the stones began to shift, and the archway opened with a loud, echoing groan. Marcus stepped back, startled. What the hell was that? Zethra didn't answer. She was too focused on the archway, her alien eyes studying the intricate symbols that now glowed brighter than before. "It's a gateway," she said finally, her voice filled with reverence. "This was a portal. It leads deeper into the heart of the planet." Marcus glanced at the archway, feeling a mixture of excitement and dread. What lay beyond it? And what had Zethra meant when she said it was a portal? Was it a doorway to another part of the world, or something else entirely? "I thought we were looking for answers," Marcus said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "What if we're walking into a trap?" Zethra turned to him, her gaze soft but resolute. "We have to know what's inside. If we don't, we'll never understand the true nature of this world. We're connected to it now, Marcus. We have no choice but to face it." With a deep breath, Marcus nodded. He didn't fully understand everything Zethra had said, but he knew one thing for sure. They were in this together. Whatever this portal was, they would face it side by side. They stepped through the archway, and immediately the temperature dropped. The air was dense, filled with an ancient energy that seemed to cling to their skin. As they moved forward, the world around them shifted. The trees that once surrounded them seemed to fade, replaced by towering stone structures that looked like ruins of a once great civilization. The place felt abandoned, yet alive with echoes of its past. The ruins were covered in the same glowing symbols that had adorned the archway, their meaning lost to time. The ground was uneven, and Marcus had to watch his step as he navigated the ancient stones. Everything about this place felt alien, even though it was now part of their world. "Look at this," Zethra whispered, her voice filled with awe. Ahead of them, the ruins opened into a vast chamber. In the center of the room was a large pedestal, and atop it was a glowing crystal. The crystal pulsed with energy, casting a faint bluish light that illuminated the entire chamber. The walls of the chamber were lined with more symbols, each one more intricate than the last. Marcus stepped closer to the pedestal, drawn by the crystal's hypnotic glow. His fingers itched to touch it, but something in the back of his mind told him to be cautious. "What is it?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zethra moved forward, her eyes locked on the crystal. "This is the heart of the planet," she said softly. "This crystal, it holds the knowledge of the ancient civilization that once lived here. It's the source of their power." Marcus reached out, but before he could touch the crystal, Zethra grabbed his arm. "Wait," she warned. "It's not just a source of power. It's also a weapon. If you touch it without understanding its purpose, it could destroy us both." Marcus froze, his hand just inches from the crystal. "What do you mean, a weapon?" Zethra's expression grew grave. The ancient civilization that created this place was destroyed by their own technology. They sought to control the power of the crystal, but in the end, it controlled them. We must tread carefully. Marcus pulled his hand back slowly. This was no ordinary crystal. It was something far more dangerous. But the question remained, What was it that had brought them here? Was it fate, or had they been guided by something else entirely? They stood there for a moment, the weight of their discovery settling in. The crystal was a key, but a key to what? And why had they been led here, to this forsaken place in the heart of the alien planet? As they turned to leave, Marcus couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning of their journey. The crystal was just the first piece of the puzzle. Whatever lay ahead, they would have to face it together. The discovery of the crystal had shaken Marcus to his core. The ancient ruins, the overwhelming sense of power radiating from the crystal, it all felt too much to process. The remnants of a once great civilization, long forgotten, had left behind a relic of unimaginable energy. And now it was in their hands, though still dangerous. The knowledge contained in the crystal could be the key to their escape, but it also held the potential for destruction. The fate of their survival, and perhaps the fate of this strange world, rested on their next move. Marcus and Zethra stood at the threshold of the chamber, the pulsating light of the crystal casting long shadows on the walls. The silence was deafening as they took in the magnitude of their discovery. It was as if the planet itself had drawn them here for a reason. But what was that reason? Were they meant to save this world, or was this crystal part of something darker that had doomed the planet long ago? Zethra was the first to break the silence, her voice soft but urgent. "We can't stay here long. The energy from the crystal is already starting to affect the planet's core. We've seen the signs, storms, tremors. If we don't leave soon, this place will collapse on itself." Marcus knew she was right. The air felt thick with an electric charge, and the ground beneath them was starting to rumble. The weight of the planet's hidden power was beginning to make itself known. He glanced at the crystal one last time, its blue glow flickering in time with his heartbeat. "Then it's time to go," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of determination and fear. "But where do we go? The ship's gone. The planet's falling apart. And we're in the middle of nowhere." Zethra turned to him, her alien eyes glowing with a quiet intensity. "There's one place we haven't searched yet, the river." It's said that the river leads to an ancient city, a city that holds the technology to transport us off this world. The crystal's energy will guide us there. Marcus nodded. He didn't fully understand how the crystal could lead them to this city, but he trusted Zethra. She had been his guide on this strange journey from the moment they crashed. And now she was their best hope of escaping this dying planet. The rumbling beneath their feet grew stronger, and the walls of the chamber began to tremble. There was no time to waste. They made their way back through the ruins, the landscape now feeling even more oppressive. The forest around them was eerily silent, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The path they had taken before seemed to have shifted. What had once been a clear route was now filled with fallen debris and cracks in the ground. It was as though the very planet was reconfiguring itself, warping to reflect the chaos unleashed by the crystal. "Do you hear that?" Marcus asked, his voice strained. There was a low hum in the air, almost like a vibration that seemed to penetrate deep into his bones. The ground shook again, and the distant sound of thunder rumbled ominously across the sky. Zethra's face tightened. "We don't have much time. The planet is starting to destabilize. We have to move faster." They pushed forward, the urgency of their situation pushing them to their limits. The once lush terrain had now become a labyrinth of jagged rocks and unstable ground. But despite the danger, there was a strange sense of clarity in Marcus's mind. He knew they had to reach the river, no matter the cost. After what felt like hours of navigating through the crumbling landscape, they finally arrived at the river. The water was strange, dark, almost black, but with a faint glow that seemed to pulse in sync with the crystal's energy. The river stretched out before them, winding through the land like a serpent, disappearing into the distant mountains. "There it is," Zethra said, her voice low but filled with hope. "The city lies beyond the river. We just have to follow the current." Marcus nodded, relieved to have found their way. The water seemed to call to him, its surface reflecting the alien sky above them in ripples. But there was no time to waste in awe. The planet was still shaking, and the storm that had once been a distant rumble was now moving closer, filling the air with a sharp, biting wind. Zethra led the way as they began to wade into the river, the cold water rushing around their legs. The current was strong, but Zethra seemed to move with ease, her alien strength allowing her to cut through the water like it was nothing. Marcus struggled a bit more, the weight of his suit and gear making it difficult to keep up. As they continued downstream, the sky above began to darken. The wind picked up, and Marcus could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The storm was close now, too close. He could hear the distant howl of the wind, and the trees on the shore began to bend violently, as if they were being uprooted by an unseen force. "We need to hurry," Marcus said, his voice strained as he struggled against the current. The river seemed to be pulling him downstream, but the urgency in his voice spurred him forward. Zethra glanced over her shoulder, her expression grim. "The storm's not the only thing we need to worry about. Something's coming for us." Before Marcus could respond, the first of the creatures appeared, slithering out from the depths of the river, their massive bodies coiling around the rocks and trees along the bank. They were enormous, their scales glistening with a wet sheen. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent energy, and their mouths opened wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Marcus's heart raced as he grabbed Zethra's arm. "We have to fight them." Zethra shook her head. "No, we don't have time for that. We need to reach the city, now." With that, Zethra pushed forward with all her might, and Marcus followed closely behind, his every instinct telling him to turn and fight. But he trusted her judgment. They had to keep moving. The creatures didn't pursue them immediately, but Marcus could feel their presence, their eyes watching them from the depths of the river. The feeling of being hunted only added to the intensity of the situation. The river was their only path forward. They finally reached the end of the river, and there, perched on the cliffs ahead, stood the ancient city. It was a massive structure, its towers reaching into the sky like the spires of a forgotten kingdom. The architecture was like nothing Marcus had ever seen, alien, intricate, and beautiful. The city seemed to hum with an energy that resonated in the air around them. "This is it," Zethra said, her voice filled with awe. The city, the heart of the ancient civilization. They sprinted toward the gates, which seemed to open in response to their presence. Inside, the city was silent, yet alive with energy. The walls pulsed with light, and the air felt thick with the hum of ancient technology. Zethra led the way as they moved deeper into the heart of the city. At the center of the city stood a massive tower, its structure gleaming with an otherworldly glow. Zethra turned to Marcus. "Inside, there's a device, a ship that can take us home. The crystal will power it." Marcus nodded, his heart pounding with hope. This was it, the final chance to escape. They entered the tower, and at its peak, they found the ship. It was like nothing Marcus had ever seen. It was sleek and powerful, with an almost organic design. The crystal in his hand pulsed, reacting to the ship's energy. Zethra placed her hand on the ship's control panel, and the ship hummed to life. The doors opened, and a faint shimmering light filled the space. "Let's go," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Together, they entered the ship, the doors closing behind them. As the engines roared to life, Marcus looked out the viewport, watching the crumbling planet shrink below them. The storm, the creatures, the destruction, all of it was fading away, left behind on the dying world. As the ship ascended into the sky, Marcus felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had made it. They were going home. But even as the stars stretched out before them, he knew one thing: this adventure had changed him forever. He had learned that survival wasn't just about getting away from danger. It was about the relationships we form, the bonds we create, and the strength we find in the face of the unknown. And as the ship sped toward the stars, Marcus couldn't help but wonder, what other worlds lay out there, waiting to be discovered?